I'm telling you, a girl don't know how to act when you get a little fresh retwist, okay? Bloop. Bloop. Have you feeling a little spicy, you know, a little serving you all types of spicy cider. Oh, 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 oh. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh, child, okay. Yes, ma'am. Just, do not mind me, okay? Do not mind me. Ooh, 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 ooh. Today is gonna be a good day. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Legacy Speaks. There are a number of people who fail to realize that depression is a real life daily struggle for many individuals. So today we're defining what depression is, talking about the signs and symptoms, as well as discussing ways that we can cope with it. But before we jump into all of that, please be sure to hit that subscription button below. That way you can stay up to date on newly released content on a regular basis. So let's dive right in. Before going into what depression is, it is important to talk about what it is not. Most people assume that grieving and having a low mood are synonymous with depression because the emotional and behavioral characteristics seem to be about the same. The difference between depression and low mood is the intensity and the length of time. When someone is generally sad or upset, those feelings tend to go away in about a week or two, especially when those things become better. For example, when you watch something on the news that has you a bit emotional, typically that sadness will go away over time and you're still able to do your daily activities. With depression, symptoms like sadness and irritability last regardless of changes in circumstances. And this negatively impacts your day-to-day functionality. This can look like completely isolating from friends and family, loss of appetite, the inability to sleep, or the increased desire to no longer want to do the things that you normally would do. The same is with grieving. The grieving process has no set time frame and is marked by a deep sadness. However, that tends to come and go in waves. People still experience some form of happiness as they reminisce on the good times and memories with their loved one. Also, this sadness doesn't affect one's self-esteem. Many people with depression experience feelings of worthlessness and have a negative perception of self. Now we're going to talk about depression and the signs of depression. For the sake of this video, we're just going to focus on major depressive disorder, and we already touched on that briefly. People with depression don't have a specific reason for being sad, they just are. Aside from the ones mentioned before, additional signs or symptoms include the decreased energy, thoughts of suicide or actual attempts, restlessness, difficulty concentrating and making decisions, anxiety, hopelessness, and physical aches and pains without any clear cause of it. Symptoms of depression need to be consistently present for at least 2 weeks before one can be diagnosed with it. Keep in mind that everyone is different and not all these symptoms will be seen in a person. And some of you guys are probably like, well, Sierra, I don't battle with that type of depression, which is understandable, but like I said, we're only focusing on major depressive disorder for right now. There are a number of other forms of depression as well that some of you may already be familiar with, and I'll also provide resources in the description box as well. Postpartum depression is a commonly noted one, especially among mothers who recently had children. Psychotic depression is marked by hallucinations and delusion. Seasonal affective disorder typically occurs at the onset of the winter months, but this really lifts around the springtime when the sunlight increases. This is actually the reason why I'm doing this video, because it's common for people to experience this form of depression around the holiday season. I also want to briefly mention bipolar disorder. It's a completely different diagnosis. However, it's important to mention this because it's marked by periods of highs, also known as manic states, and lows, which are depressive states. But we'll save that for another video. Causes and risk factors for depression is something that we also need to discuss. There are a number of factors that contribute to someone developing depression. For example, brain physiology is one of them, as well as the levels of certain chemicals in the brain, which are called neurotransmitters. It's important to look at one's family history because genetics and family history of depression is something to consider. Stressful or painful situations like death of a loved one, loss, unemployment, and relationship problems can also play a role. Other things to consider are trauma, abuse, and neglect, negative or self-critical patterns of thinking, and medical conditions, as well as a history of mental illness. Last but not least, a history of drug and alcohol abuse can be a contributing risk factor as well. Okay, let's get to the meat of the matter, the steak and potatoes. Let's talk about treating and coping with depression. Psychotherapy and medication are just some few, but let's explore some alternatives, okay? Exercising helps produce neurotransmitters that aid in the elevating of moods. Journaling helps processing thoughts and emotions and provides you with insight on what you're experiencing. Spending time with friends and loved ones reduces the tendency to isolate and keeps you from being trapped in your own thoughts. These are just 3 of a plethora of examples that you can use to help cope with your depression. Now, it's important to continue educating yourself and the others around you about depression so that you can kind of gauge what types of treatment and activities will be best for you. It's a process, and if you're struggling with depression, you're not alone. There are a number of resources out there that will help you take it one day at a time. Thank you so much for tuning in. Depression is more common than we think, and although this scratches the surface, at least this can provide you with some basics. If you or someone you know is battling with depression, I encourage you to seek therapy or counseling so that you can get back to living your best life. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And I have included some great resources in the description box below. And I'll be sharing more via my social media outlets. So definitely stay connected on Legacy SPKS on everything.